Senna moved closer to the window, her crystalline form refracting the light from Earth below. Your species is fascinating, Doctor. Most races we encounter either focus entirely on peaceful development or martial prowess. You seem to have found a rather explosive middle ground. We prefer to think of it as practical idealism, Chen replied. We dream of a peaceful galaxy, but we're prepared for other possibilities. Speaking of which, she produced a data crystal. These are the specifications for a defensive system we're proposing for the Galactic Council's consideration. We call it the Aegis Initiative. Zerlix accepted the crystal with trepidation. Defensive system. A network of platforms similar to ours, but scaled up significantly. We believe every peaceful species deserves protection. We're offering to help provide it. As Zerlix reviewed the specifications, his primary heart nearly stopped. The scale of what humanity was proposing was unprecedented. A network of defensive platforms that could protect not just planets, but entire sectors of space. This would change the balance of power in the galaxy, he whispered. That's the idea, Chen agreed. Peace through preparedness, Ambassador, on a galactic scale. As the Earth rotated below them, Zerlix realized that humanity's admission to the Galactic Council would not be the simple diplomatic formality he had expected. These humans, with their overwhelming approaches and uncompromising dedication to defense, were about to change everything. And somewhere deep in his diplomatic core, he wondered if that might not be exactly what the galaxy needed. The Galactic Council chamber hummed with tension as representatives from over 1,000 civilizations debated humanity's Aegis Initiative. The massive amphitheater, normally a model of diplomatic restraint, had devolved into clusters of heated discussion. High Counselor Vexera of the Meridian Collective slammed her gravitational manipulator against the podium, sending ripples through the chamber's acoustic field. Order. We will have order in this chamber. Dr. Sarah Chen stood calmly at the center of the storm, surrounded by holographic displays of the proposed defense network. Behind her, a massive visualization showed simulated stellar bodies orbited by platforms that dwarfed most species' capital ships. The concerns of the Council are noted, Chen began, her voice carrying through the translation field. But humanity stands by our assessment. The galaxy's current defensive doctrine is insufficient. Insufficient. The hegemony's representative, a towering mass of crystalline shadows, leaned forward. Our combined fleets have maintained peace for 10,000 cycles. Maintained peace for whom? Chen's question cut through the chamber like a blade. In the past cycle alone, 3 developing civilizations have been eliminated by aggressive species from uncharted space. The combined fleets arrived too late to do anything but count the dead. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The recent losses had shaken many worlds' faith in the traditional approach to galactic defense. What humanity proposes, Chen continued, manipulating the holographic display, is a fundamental shift in defensive philosophy. Instead of reactive fleets, we suggest proactive protection. The Aegis platforms would provide immediate response to any threat. At what cost? A representative of the Silicon consciousness projected into the debate. The energy requirements alone would drain resources from 1,000 worlds. Chen smiled, and several species instinctively shifted in their seats. They were learning that human smiles didn't always indicate pleasure. That's why we're not asking for resources, she gestured, and new schematics materialized. Humanity will provide the technology, construction, and power generation. We ask only for permission to proceed. The chamber erupted again. The idea that a single species, especially one so new to the galactic stage, would undertake such a massive project independently was unprecedented. High Counselor Vexera's manipulator crackled. And what does humanity expect in return for this generosity? Stability. Chen's response was immediate. Every species that falls to invasion or aggression represents an incalculable loss of potential, of knowledge, of unique perspectives. We consider that cost too high. The hegemony representative's crystalline form darkened. And we are to believe humanity has no other motives, that he would commit such resources purely out of altruism. Not altruism, self-interest. Chen's directness seemed to surprise the chamber. A stable galaxy is a prosperous galaxy. Moreover, every species we protect today might become the ally we need tomorrow. Ambassador Zerlix, watching from his position among the senior diplomatic corps, felt his tentacles curl with understanding. Humanity wasn't just proposing a defensive network. They were rewriting the rules of galactic politics. The platform's specifications, a representative of the machine consensus intoned, suggest capabilities beyond purely defensive measures. Correct. Chen didn't hesitate. Each platform carries enough firepower to deter any reasonable threat, and several unreasonable ones. You're proposing to install the most powerful weapon systems ever conceived throughout Council space, the hegemony representative thundered. How are we to trust such power won't be misused? Chen's expression hardened. Each platform's control systems will be shared between humanity and the local species it protects. No unilateral action would be possible. We're offering shields, not chains. The debate raged for hours. Species that had suffered losses to raiders and invaders largely supported the initiative. Older, more established powers expressed concerns about shifting the balance of power. The Silicon consciousness calculated probabilities. The machine consensus processed scenarios. Finally, High Counselor Vexera called for a preliminary vote. The results displayed across the chamber's ceiling in a cascade of light. No consensus. Further debate would be required. As the session adjourned, Ambassador Zerlix approached Chen. An interesting strategy, Doctor. You knew they wouldn't approve it immediately. Of course. Chen was already reviewing data on her portable terminal. But they're discussing it. That's step 1. And step 2. Chen's gaze lifted to the star map hovering above the chamber, where red markers indicated the locations of civilizations lost to invasion or aggression. Step 2 is waiting for them to realize they can't afford to say no. As if in response to her words, a priority alert flashed across every communication system in the chamber. In the outer rim, another developing civilization had just gone silent. Chen's expression remained neutral, but her eyes carried the weight of anticipation. How many more will we lose before the Council decides, Ambassador? Zerlix watched as the alert rippled through the chamber, saw the impact on representatives who had argued against the initiative. Fewer than you might think, Doctor. Fewer than you might think. As the chamber emptied, the holographic display continued to rotate, showing humanity's proposed platforms standing guard over countless worlds. To some, they represented a threatening change to the galactic order. To others, hope for a more secure future. To humanity, they were simply the logical next step. After all, as Chen had said in her opening remarks, the best time to build a defense is before you need it. The second best time is now. The alert came at what humans called 0 Dark 30. Admiral Helena Rossi sat bolt upright in her quarters aboard Aegis Command Station Theta as the AIA's voice cut through her sleep. Priority 1 alert. Unidentified fleet signatures detected in the Proxima Centauri sector. Multiple vessels on attack trajectory toward protected system HFY 317. She was in the command center 2 minutes later, uniform slightly rumpled but mind razor sharp. The holographic display showed everything they'd feared. A massive invasion fleet approaching one of their protectorate worlds. Status report, she barked, scanning the tactical readouts. Her XO, Commander David Chen, responded instantly. 60-plus capital ships, unknown configuration. Energy signatures suggest weaponry we haven't encountered before. They're not responding to hails in any known frequency. The Nephilim, came a quiet voice. Ambassador Zerlix had arrived, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. We'd hoped the reports were exaggerated. Rossi's eyes narrowed. You know these hostiles. They emerge from dark space every few centuries. No communication, no demands. They simply consume. The last civilization they encountered was reduced to atomic particles within hours. Not this time. Rossi's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Status of PS-317's defensive grid. Aegis platforms 1 through 20 standing by. All systems nominal, Chen reported. Local species has been notified, and their defense forces are coordinating with our systems. Rossi allowed herself a grim smile. This was exactly the scenario they'd prepared for, exactly why humanity had pushed so hard for the Aegis initiative. Initialize Thundershield protocols. Authorization Rossi, Alpha 70. Throughout the system, massive platforms that had laid dormant for months began to awaken. Energy readings spiked as fusion reactors powered up. Targeting systems came online, tracking the approaching fleet with devastating precision. Admiral, Chen's voice carried an edge of concern. The Nephilim fleet is launching some kind of energy weapon. Readings are off the charts. They watched as a beam of pure destruction lanced out from the lead vessel, powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. It struck the outermost defensive platform and dissipated harmlessly against shields humanity had designed to withstand the death of stars. Platform 1 reports shields at 97% capacity, Chen announced, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. They absorbed most of the energy and are converting it to power for the defensive grid. Zerlix's tentacles went rigid with shock. Impossible. Nothing has ever survived their primary weapon. Return fire, Rossi ordered. Show them why you don't attack protected worlds. The platforms moved with synchronized precision. Mass drivers powered up. Targeting solutions were calculated. And in one devastating moment, humanity's defensive doctrine was demonstrated on a galactic scale. The first salvo caught the Nephilim completely by surprise. Their ships, designed to deliver overwhelming force against helpless victims, had never needed significant defenses of their own. Relativistic projectiles tore through their fleet like paper, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. Multiple hostile vessels disabled, Chen reported. Their formation is breaking up. They're attempting to retreat. Allow it, Rossi commanded. But make sure they understand the message. Target their flagship with a warning shot. A single platform rotated, bringing its main gun to bear. A shot passed so close to the Nephilim flagship that it scorched the alien hull without causing serious damage. The message was clear. We could destroy you, but we're choosing not to. The retreat became a rout. Ships vanished into FTL jumps, leaving their disabled companions behind. Within 20 minutes, the great Nephilim fleet, terror of the dark spaces, had been thoroughly defeated without a single loss of life. Recovery teams standing by, Chen reported. We're picking up life signs from the disabled vessels. Rossi nodded. Secure the survivors. I want to know everything about where they came from and why they're here. She turned to Zerlix, who stood transfixed by the tactical display. Ambassador, I believe the Council will want to witness this. The Council, Zerlix managed, his translator struggling with his awe, will need to reassess many things. In all our history, no one has ever. They simply. We don't believe in half measures, Rossi stated simply. When we make a promise to protect something, we make sure we can keep that promise. As recovery ships moved to secure the disabled Nephilim vessels, news of the engagement was already spreading throughout Council space. The message was clear. The galaxy had changed. Species that had lived in fear of the dark spaces between stars began to hope. Worlds that had hesitated to join the Aegis initiative were now scrambling to sign up. In the command center, Rossi watched the cleanup operations with satisfaction. Commander Chen, prepare a full report for the Council. Include all tactical data. I want them to understand exactly what happened here. Yes, Admiral, and the Nephilim survivors. Treat them well. Show them every courtesy. Rossi's expression hardened slightly. But make sure they understand. If they ever return to protected space, courtesy will not be our priority. As the immediate crisis passed, Zerlix found his voice again. You knew they would come, didn't you? That's why you pushed so hard for the defensive network. We knew something would come, Rossi corrected. It always does. The strong prey on the weak until someone stronger stops them. Tale as old as time. And now? What happens now? Rossi gestured at the tactical display, where damaged Nephilim ships were being tractored to safety by human vessels. Now we do what humanity has always done. We learn from this. We improve our defenses. We prepare for the next threat. She smiled slightly. And maybe, just maybe, we make some new friends in the process. The ambassador watched as human ships rendered aid to the very beings that had come to destroy them. Perhaps, he reflected, this was why humanity's approach to defense had seemed so extreme. They hadn't just built weapons, they'd built the means to enforce peace itself. The Galactic Engineering Symposium had never seen such attendance. Species that had historically shown little interest in military technology crowded the massive halls of the Arcturus station, all drawn by one overwhelming fact. Humanity's defensive systems worked. Dr. Marcus Wong stood before a mixed audience of organic and synthetic beings, his holographic displays showing the aftermath of what was now called the Nephilim incident. The key wasn't just building bigger weapons, he explained, manipulating the display to show the internal workings of an Aegis platform. It was changing how we think about defense itself. In the audience, a representative of the Silicon consciousness pulsed with curiosity. Elaborate. Your systems appear to violate several established principles of energy conservation. That's because we stopped trying to fight physics, Wong replied, zooming in on a power core. Instead, we learned to work with it. The Nephilim's energy weapon. We didn't just block it. We absorbed it, converted it, and used it to power our own systems. The revelation sent ripples through the audience. Species that had spent millennia developing ever more powerful weapons suddenly faced the possibility that they'd been approaching the problem from the wrong direction entirely. A hegemony engineer, their crystalline form vibrating with barely contained excitement, raised an appendage. Your defensive platforms, they're not simply weapon systems, are they? Wong smiled. Finally, someone sees it. No, they're not just weapons. They're catalysts for change. He gestured, and the display shifted to show a broader view of protected space. Every platform we install becomes part of a larger network. They share energy, information, resources. They learn, adapt, and evolve. Evolution implies reproduction. A machine consensus node observed. These platforms self-replicate. Not exactly, Wong corrected, but they do inspire creation. Since the Nephilim incident, how many species have approached us about collaboration on defensive technology? The answer hung in the air, virtually all of them. In the back of the hall, Ambassador Zerlix watched with his successor, a younger diplomat named Krellin. Did you expect this? Krellin asked, gesturing at the diverse crowd. This level of integration. Humanity has a way of exceeding expectations, Zerlix replied. Though I doubt even they foresaw this. On stage, Wong was demonstrating how human defensive principles could be adapted to various species' existing technologies. The Silicon consciousness could enhance their computational matrices. The hegemony could refine their crystal-based energy systems. Even the machine consensus found new paths for optimization. But the real breakthrough, Wong continued, came when we stopped thinking of defense as a solo endeavor. The display showed multiple species ships working in concert with Aegis platforms. Every civilization brings unique perspectives, unique solutions, by combining them. He triggered a simulation. The audience watched in awe as defensive systems from a dozen species synchronized, creating protection far greater than the sum of their parts. This is why we made our technology open to allies, Wong explained. Not because we're altruistic, but because we understand that true security comes from cooperation. A representative from a newly spacefaring race raised their appendage. But what of the cost? Surely such integration requires massive resources. Less than you might think. Wong's display shifted to show economic projections. When multiple species collaborate, when we share resources and knowledge, The cost per world drops dramatically. More importantly, what's the cost of not defending ourselves? The question silenced the hall. Too many present had seen worlds fall, civilizations end, because they couldn't protect themselves. In the following hours, Wang and his team conducted workshops with various species, showing how human defensive principles could be adapted to their unique physiologies and technologies. The silicon consciousness discovered they could enhance their processing cores using modified shield harmonics. The hegemony found ways to amplify their crystal-based weapons using human power distribution theories. But perhaps most significantly, species that had historically been enemies found themselves working together, united by the common goal of defense. Ancient rivalries began to fade as engineers and scientists discovered that cooperation yielded better results than competition. "It's remarkable," Krellin observed to his mentor. "They're not just changing how we fight. They're changing how we interact." "That was always their goal," Zerlix replied. "Remember what Dr. Chen said in that first council meeting? Every species we protect today might become the ally we need tomorrow." As the symposium continued, news arrived from the frontier. Another unknown aggressor had attempted to raid a protected world. The combined defense network had rendered the attack harmless, and the would-be invaders were now in diplomatic discussions with the Council. Wang incorporated the fresh data into his presentations, showing how the network had adapted to the new threat. "This is why we emphasize flexibility over raw power," he explained. "The galaxy keeps changing. Our defenses must change with it." By the symposium's end, over 40 species had signed agreements to integrate their defensive technologies with the human design network. The silicon consciousness had committed their vast processing power to improving response times. The hegemony offered their crystal fabrication expertise to enhance shield systems. "We're creating something unprecedented," Wang concluded in his final address. "Not just a defensive network, but a foundation for genuine cooperation. Every species that joins us makes the network stronger, and every improvement we make together benefits us all." As the attendees departed, carrying new knowledge and possibilities back to their homeworlds, Zerlix reflected on how far things had come. Humanity's excessive approach to defense had transformed into something far more profound, a framework for galactic cooperation. The weapons had started it, yes, but what they were building now went far beyond mere defense. They were forging connections, breaking down barriers, creating understanding between species that had never truly communicated before. And somewhere in dark space, potential aggressors were learning a new truth. The galaxy was no longer an easy target. It was becoming something far more formidable. A community that stood together, protected each other, and grew stronger with every attempted attack. 5 years after the Nephilim incident, the Galactic Council chamber had changed. Where once species sat in carefully segregated sections, now representatives mingled freely. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic politics for millennia had given way to something more collaborative. High Counselor Vexera, now in her final term, stood before the assembled representatives. Behind her, a real-time display showed the current state of protected space, a vast network of interconnected defensive systems, each incorporating technologies from dozens of species. When humanity first proposed the Aegis Initiative, she began, her gravitational manipulator humming softly. Many thought it would spark a new arms race. Instead, it has created something unprecedented, true galactic cooperation. The display shifted to show statistics. Raids on developing civilizations, down 97%. Interspecies conflicts, reduced by 84%. First contact success rate, improved by 91%. But perhaps most remarkably, Vexera continued, is what happened to the aggressors themselves. The image changed to show a Nephilim vessel, now transformed. Where once it had carried planet-killing weapons, it now housed sophisticated scanning equipment. The former invasion fleet had become part of the galaxy's early warning network, their unique experience with dark space making them invaluable allies. Dr. Sarah Chen, now Earth's permanent representative to the Council, watched from her position with quiet satisfaction. Beside her, Ambassador Zerlix's successor, Krellin, leaned in close. "Did you know it would turn out this way?" he asked softly. Chen's smile held decades of wisdom. "We hoped. Human history taught us something crucial. True security doesn't come from having the biggest weapons. It comes from turning potential enemies into friends." The display showed more transformed aggressors. Raiders turned peacekeepers, invaders become protectors. Each had discovered that cooperation offered better prospects than conflict. "The network proved something we'd long suspected," Chen continued. "Most species don't choose violence because they want to. They choose it because they feel they have no other options." High Counselor Vex Era was describing the latest expansion of the network. The Silicon Consciousness had developed predictive algorithms that could identify struggling civilizations before they turned to aggression. The hegemony's crystal technology now allowed instant communication across vast distances. The machine consensus had integrated their processing power to coordinate responses to any threat. But the greatest achievement, Vex Era announced, isn't technological at all. The display showed something simple: representatives from formerly hostile species working together on a new defensive platform. Their children playing together in mixed-species schools. Cultural exchanges becoming commonplace. "Humanity's greatest contribution wasn't their weapons," she continued. "It was showing us that true strength comes from unity. That the best defense isn't a wall to keep others out, but a door to let them in." In the years since the Aegis Initiative began, the galaxy had changed fundamentally. Species that once feared the dark between stars now explored it confidently, knowing they weren't alone. Developing civilizations grew without fear of predation, adding their unique perspectives to the galactic community. "We still maintain the platforms," Chen explained to Krellin. "We still prepare for threats, but now we have something better than weapons. We have trust." The session concluded with the announcement that 3 more former aggressor species had requested to join the network. Not as targets, not as threats, but as partners. As the chamber emptied, Chen found herself at the observation deck, where she'd first presented humanity's plans years ago. The Earth was visible below, its orbital platforms still standing guard. But they were different now, incorporating technologies from a dozen species, serving as much as communication hubs as defensive installations. Looking back, Ambassador Zerlix's familiar voice came from behind her. The elderly diplomat had returned for this historic session. "Looking forward," Chen corrected. "Do you remember what you asked me when we first proposed this? Whether humans really built all this just for defense?" "I remember. You never gave me a direct answer." Chen's gaze remained on the glittering network of platforms and ships that connected the galaxy, because the true answer would have sounded impossible then. "We didn't build it to defend against enemies. We built it to create allies." Below them, a former Nephilim ship docked with an Aegis platform, its crew now part of the same network they had once tried to destroy. Throughout protected space, species that had once been bitter enemies now worked together, their combined knowledge and technology creating defenses far stronger than any could have managed alone. "The weapons were never the point," Chen said softly. "They were just the beginning. What we really built was understanding." As night fell over Earth, the defensive platforms continued their eternal vigil. But they no longer stood as warnings to potential aggressors. Instead, they had become beacons of hope, symbols of what was possible when the galaxy's species chose to stand together. The legacy of humanity's excessive approach to defense would echo through generations. Sometimes the best way to prevent a fight isn't to win it, but to make it unnecessary in the first place. And in the vast darkness between stars, countless civilizations flourished, protected not just by humanity's weapons, but by something far more powerful: the knowledge that they were not alone.